I'm Thomas, originally a media planner in classical media agencies until I met Klaas, who's going to introduce himself in a few moments. We do a lot of traveling, but what we're talking about today is journalistic content and how it is created and what we can do with it, how it influences us. Klaas and I do a lot of traveling into countries that you would not have on your vacation list. We travel to Azerbaijan, to Afghanistan, to South Sudan, to Libya, Iraq, Iran, Mali, all these wonderful places in the world, which we call post-crisis regions. And there we do journalism. Please introduce yourself shortly and tell us what you're doing exactly.
Yes, my name is Klaas Glenewinkel, and before I start to go deeper into the world of media and journalism and content in some dangerous regions, I would like to show you a clip.
I guess now the attendees from the other sessions are going to come upstairs.
Okay, so basically the core thing, what we're doing is capacity building for journalists. We are working in 12, 13 different countries throughout the world, mostly countries where the regime has toppled. And then there is a certain media situation, which I will explain later. And there's a lack of capacity in the media sector. And what we are doing is bring this capacity through training on the job into these regions. This is, for example, a project picture from Khartoum, where we invited journalists from South and North Sudan, from both parts of these new countries, to work on stories together. This is a media academy we are running in Iraq. Right now, of course, it's very important that journalists who are reporting on ISIS issues are not only well trained in professional journalism and in verification of news, but also in security matters. And this is what our media academy is involved in. And this is a participant of a training who's filming out in Basra in the south of the country. And we have just done a training in last October with sports commentators in Pyongyang, which is continued now, where we went with Marcel Reif, who is a German sports commentator, to North Korea and trained approximately 50 people from the media sports business. And those students which are working for us and doing great, they're getting sometimes certificates. This is an award we're having for a journalist who wrote stories on refugees between Iraq and Syria, and we call it the Open Eye Award, which is an annual award we are giving to very ambitious journalists here. We are also... No, now you have to ask a question, I think.
We've rehearsed this thousands of times. That sounds good. So we're the good guys, right? We're doing a lot of great work. But what does this mean to the people in these regions? What role do we play? And what kind of media?
Okay, so the training method we are having is not only training and capacity building, it's all about publishing. So the stories these journalists write, or these radio journalists do, or photographers do, is published in local media. So if you buy a newspaper today in Kabul or in South Sudan, you will find, or this is Iran, you will find an article by one of our students. So this dialogue between our editors, local editors, and the students who are taking part in the capacity building is what we call training. So basically it's like a regular newsroom, but the training aspect is very much focused on, these are local partners we are working with and we know, of course, very well. We are also doing our own little publication sometimes because we like print, and so we don't only do websites, but we also do print. And so, for example, the video you have seen in the beginning is all about a print and online publication called correspondence.org. And the people you have seen in the clip are the trainees, which are working for this publication for 1 or 2 years. They get even paid if they write, of course. So it's like a regular newsroom. And it's published in local media. This is a printing house also in South Sudan. This is a newspaper we are printing there. It's called The Niles. It's coming out next week. And it's a popular newspaper of bilingual. For example, the country is working in 2 languages. In the north, in Khartoum, people speak Arabic. In the south, they speak many languages, but one is English. So the magazine is in both languages. This correspondence magazine then you can buy in newsstands here in Tripolis, for example, and people are selling it as a regular newspaper.
So why are you doing this? There must be a reason.
Naja, the question is, if you, again, we believe that media plays a strong role in stabilization of a country such as Syria right now, or Iraq or South Sudan, because the people, usually you have the situation that during Saddam, for example, in 2003, 2004, when he toppled down, you have an explosion of media outlets. 1 year before, you had 2 newspapers, 1 radio station, and 1 television station. Suddenly, short after this, you have 1,000. And so these newspapers, of course, they need staff, they need team, which they don't have. And this can be a great risk to the security of the country because, you know, people, even if they don't want, if they're not taught properly, they can fuel a conflict with bad journalism, which we have seen in Rwanda, for example, or which we see now in Iraq or in South Sudan, that bad journalism really can fuel a conflict. And so media plays a strong role for the identity, its role as a watchdog in these countries to stabilize a newborn country and to fight against a conflict in creating a dialogue.
Okay, everybody gets the idea of journalistic content. Do you have examples? It looks like you have an example here for another kind of media.
In some countries, of course, people can't read, and illiteracy is very high, up to 70, 80, 90% in parts of Sudan, of course. So if you work with if you work with regular print journalists, of course, that doesn't work over there. Maybe people have mobile phones by now, but they wouldn't be able to read on the mobile phone since they're not able to read at all. So, in these countries, often political issues, information, traditions, cultural phenomena are transported via music. So we started a music production company, which is regularly putting out music productions. This is one we did in Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya, where we invited women from these 3 countries, and we locked them in a room, and after 10 days, they came out with a wonderful CD, which I actually have with me, so if anybody is into good music, I have some. This is a cassette. In Sudan, people listen to cassettes. So this is a cassette we produced. And radio, of course. Most important medium in those countries is radio besides television, because, you know, with radio you can listen to it even if there's an energy shortage, if the electricity is off, which is often the case, you can still listen to it in the car or with batteries. So if you want to reach the people in Syria today, for example, those who are interested in local news. We set up a network of radio transmitters throughout the country, and we are working with 8 radio stations. This is one of them in Aleppo, which we set up so the people there can listen for the first time since many years to a radio program which is not produced by the Assad regime.
Okay. Training journalists in these countries naturally is a very, very important part of building democracy. The problem, though, in these countries is that they need money. This is why we founded Plural. Plural is sort of a media agency. With Plural, we go into the same countries the journalists have been trained in, and coach them when it comes to marketing, when it comes to positioning, marketing their own media, basics of media planning so they understand the media markets, and do these trainings for the journalists themselves, for the media makers, anyone who is interested, for the founders of the media. You have some examples for that.
Well, the first question is there actually money distributed in the countries we are working? Because in the beginning we thought, there wouldn't be developing money. So the financing we get for the stuff you saw before is usually coming from international aid agencies, from the United Nations, from the European Commission, from the German Foreign Office, from the Ministry of Development, and so on. It's part of their conflict prevention program, or it's part of democratization. But usually this money is soon gone. So we looked in alternative or in sources of money where the private sectors can play a role. And we saw that, yes, the private sector is playing already a big role. We just didn't know about it. 12 billion US dollars are spent every year. 12 billion US dollar is spent every year in advertising in North Africa and Middle East. And so this money goes to people who are working in this crucial field of media production, which I have just described, but we believe it's going to the wrong ones. It's coming from those which, you know, the Gilettes and Maggies and Ferries of this world, but it's going to the wrong media outlets. It's going to the big and large and fat media outlets which have been always there because it has been just easier to work with them. But the new ones, and I explained before, there's many new ones, usually are off that list. So, first thing you have to do audience research. So we are doing a lot of audience research. This is a research we are doing currently in Afghanistan, and even we teach media owners in these countries to do their own audience research because, for example, in this little village, nobody of the international organizations would go and do audience research. And it's also sometimes, of course, just too costly because the possible revenues are too small.
One thing I would like to add, which is extremely interesting and totally unknown to that world, if you ask the people on the streets what kind of media they read and why, if you take newspapers, for instance, and you ask for the government-owned papers, which have been around all the time, they say, yeah, we know that's government-owned. We don't really read that. We just, we take it, read a few pages, and throw it away. They definitely know about the independent media, know that they are paid for, and they pass these papers on naturally from one person to the other. So in the end, the independent press has more readers and more sophisticated readers and more interested readers than the government-owned press. So these are things we have to teach the advertisers, the international advertisers who are in these markets, and naturally helps the media themselves to grow. The girl you see here in the middle is Amani Al-Tunzi. She's a female activist in Egypt, by now known around the world. She has a web radio station, which is hardly on air because she doesn't have money, and she has a weekly newspaper which is offered to 4 million Arab women in Egypt and the surrounding. How many of the huge companies have 4 million newsletters distributed? She does, this one person. So we went to Egypt to coach her for 3 days, and ended up with a business plan. A business plan that would help fund it out of advertising money, which was supposed to help her fund her web radio station. And when we got down, this is a nice story, when we got down into the details, she told me, yeah, but I don't really want commercial advertising on my radio station. Said, okay, I understand. You're an activist. You're not into this commercial stuff, but you need money to somehow. Does that mean you would not take money, for instance, from Egypt Air if they advertise on the web radio station? Never. No. She wouldn't never even talk to Egypt Air. Said, okay, how do you like this idea? Would you like to build a program that describes the situation of women around Arabic countries for the web radio station? Their situation, their education, their family roles and everything. And you could see her eyes glow, and she said, I would love to do that, but I don't have the money to travel to other countries. That, okay, this is where Egypt Air comes in. Let's talk to Egypt Air about sponsoring the program. All they do is sponsor the program that gives you the money to build the content. We promise to use the word content more often. She loved the idea, and hopefully it won't take long until they get into business. And so this is what the kind of work we do.
So, to understand a little bit more about this fantastic woman, we have a little clip.
ده اللي هقبل بيه رأي الأغلبية بس افرضي ان رأي الأغلبية ان الإخوان المسلمين تمسك whatever مش مشكلة
بقى بعد كده ان هم
يمسكوا بس ما فيش
ديمقراطية المفروض ان احنا نبقى احنا ديمقراطيين وهم ما يفرضوش الديمقراطية في البلد
لا الخوف منهم مش للدرجة اللي الناس مصورة
هم بيعملوا ايه بقى؟
احنا هنطبق مع تعاليم الاسلام خلاص ماشي ورينا بقى
لبس وحجاب
الدين الاسلامي
لو فرضوا لبس وحجاب هتعملوا ايه؟ هتعملوا ايه معلش يا جماعة؟ هتلبسوا؟ لو فرضوا لبس وحجاب تلبسوا على المسيحيين؟
لا
هم على المسلمين ما بيتكلموش عن المسلمين مش هيفرقوا I was at 25 when I started the radio station. I'm 26 when I started the coffee house. I were making money, but after the revolution there is no books sold because the people are here to eat more than getting books to read. Women issues, yeah. I have a lot of book talk about women issues. I'm thinking that when Mubarak will step down, everything it will be okay. But everything now getting worse and worse. They don't care about any democracy. They come to TV and he just talk about women who are just wearing blah blah blah. This is the problem of Egypt, what we are wearing, not what we are working, what we are eating, what we are, our medical, our insurance, our traffic, our streets. There's no problem like that.
So this clip goes on with different, activists and women who are doing amazing things in North Africa. This was one woman we have been working with for a long time now. But of course, the question then comes, she's doing this radio station, but basically her biggest success is the newsletter or her largest audience. If we are looking into a future in Cairo from a European perspective, Thomas.
This is interesting. When we started going into these countries, I sort of had the feeling I was going back into medieval times. No, I'm looking at the future. The more I see in these countries is I feel that we're looking into our media future. Naturally, I mean, Amani Atunzi operates a web radio station. Web radio is starting in Europe, and it's very, very successful there. She has an internet newsletter which is more successful than anything we can think of here. If you take a look at a country like Tunisia, 90% of the people on the streets of Tunis have a Facebook account. 90%. They use the internet as their main information medium, whereas here, television is still the largest medium, followed by newspapers. So in some way, yes, I do believe we're really looking into our own future, a future where, like a blogger would have a higher status in his environment than the editor of our newspapers. This is true in these countries already, and if I tell a daily paper in Germany what I experienced in Libya, they don't understand it. What happened here was I was talking to the chief editor of a weekly newspaper, and they have paper shortage, they have printing problems. So I asked him, if you get rid of your problems and paper is not short anymore, would you switch from a weekly newspaper to a daily newspaper? The guy laughed at me and said, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to go into a competition with the internet. I'm going to stay a weekly newspaper. Now tell that daily newspapers here in Europe, they don't understand a word. But this is the future that is coming up to them. So what we see here is journalistic content that is being created without end. The question naturally that is more of interest to you is, where's the beef for us? What does it mean to us? What can we do with it, what is happening here?
Okay, I mean, there is some things, because of course this is, since we live in Europe and we do have contacts in Europe, of course the question comes, what can we transport from there, or what can we, not only what we can give them or bring them, but what can we take? And this is just a couple of weeks ago, this is the Silicon Valley Tehran. So this this is a bunch of really amazing young internet startups in Iran. And in Iran you have the situation, as you all know, that there's the sanctions, but the sanctions really means that you cannot impossibly transfer a US dollar or you cannot transfer money to Iran at all. So if you want to hire a software developer in Iran, you can't. They are fantastic software developers, but you can't pay those people. Those people, they are all doing their own Zalandos and Amazons and eBays for the Iranian market, but they cannot link to international investors, or for example, they cannot use APIs from other software developers, mobile developers, because it's also a business transaction. So they're completely left in this isolation. We are planning now a startup group going to Tehran and discussing with them if there is possibilities to work together. And as you know, there's currently discussions about a nuclear deal between the Western world and Iran. And so when this is happening, of course, the international startup investor, angel people will go land grabbing to Iran and try to, and all these people you see here will soon be billionaires. And I know them. So another possibility, of course, which we found interesting from the beginning. So since we are organizing since we are producing this great content from these really unique regions of the world, we started to talk to international newspapers and told them, listen, you sending a correspondent to Kabul has a lot of disadvantages. Kick out your foreign correspondents and work with those local journalists, because for them $50 is a lot of money. They're much closer to the sources of information. They're not sitting in the Hyatt drinking gin tonic against malaria. No, they really, they are in the field with a bicycle like this gentleman here. So we managed to convince some of the newspapers to buy stories of us and published them. The Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung bought 40 stories, and they promoted it even on the first page. Did you know this? And on the first page of the newspaper, and we work with Die Welt and The Guardian and BBC, sometimes take a story because they start to understand that, they can save risk, not sending somebody, they can save money, and it's much, much more authentic. And also the reader behavior is, of course, changing, like we talked to them 5 years ago and they said our readers would be really nervous to read something from an author they've never heard about. Like in the FAZ, everybody who reads it, all the authors. They hardly change. It's a group and you say, oh, Peter is writing again. And but now the readers are changing because, reading blogs and tweets, you get used to different sources which you have not experienced before. So we believe that this could be an interesting dynamic or an interesting input into German or European publishing scene, to maybe invest even a little bit in training in these countries, because most of the stuff which is coming from Afghanistan needs a lot of work. So this has to be done, but if you are able or ready to take this risk, then you can get much more emotional storytelling from regions nobody wants to go, but we are all interested in.
I remember the first time we went to Egypt on one of these missions. That was shortly before the first election, and here in the Western Europe, the papers were writing about hopefully the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't win, because that's going to be terrible for the rest of the world. Talking to journalists in Cairo, they all told us, why, this is wonderful. Let the Muslim Brotherhood win the first election. They will probably. Let them win, and they're going to lose, because the first body that is elected by the people cannot win. They cannot really win. So let them lose on the first run, and then let's get back to the next elections. And these are opinions I had never read in Europe about. So it proves that it is very interesting to have people from the countries write for us, to give them their opinion. Now you have one last thing to show us.
That's it, basically. Just when we go out, I just wanted to show a funny clip which became very popular in the internet. We produced a really fantastic song in South Sudan, and as it happens sometimes, I'm trying now about the things coming from there, going to here, and going back. And so there's this musician, Emmanuel Jal, in South Sudan, which is a really fantastic musician, and we did his song with him. And then it was little bit popular on YouTube, the song, people listened to it, and some people started to take this song from South Sudan, which has very African rhythms, and were dancing through this. And South Sudan, as some of you may know, is one of the most homophobic countries in the world. And so this young guy I'm showing to you now is from Ukraine, and the song is... So I just wanted to show you how things from South, the weirdest place in South Sudan, end up in this sleeping room in Kiev, and that people, that. So this is content which can make it even to Ukraine, and if you make it there, you make it anywhere. This was it. Thank you very much. Thank you.